Thank you. All right. Good morning, everyone. It is Friday, September 27, 2004 at 9:07 a.m. And this is the meeting of the Contract Review Committee. I am Veronica Bolchik, the chair. And the first thing I'd like to do is establish quorum. So please confirm in the positive if you're here. So we have Sue Minthinen.
Present.
Joanna Roach.
Present.
John Blush.
Present.
And myself, Veronica Bolchik, establishes quorum of the CRC. I will now go to staff. We've got Jericho Melee.
Here.
And off camera, we have Alexandria Richards.
I'm here.
Okay. We also have some members of the Council for Human Services that are joining us this morning for observation and input if appropriate. So we have Suzanne Keating.
Hello.
And Tara Ristiri.
Hello.
Okay, nice to see you both this morning. This meeting is being conducted in the hybrid fashion. So all votes will be taken by roll call. Please be careful not to share your screen because that does become part of public record. And I believe that's all that I need to say as far as the two-page script we used to go through. So the first item, or I should say second item on our agenda, is to approve the agenda.
So moved.
All right, second.
Second.
All righty. So Sue Minthinen.
Aye.
Joanna Roach.
Aye.
John Blush.
Aye.
And myself, Veronica, aye. So we have an approved agenda. Any public comment? With none, we will move on. I had approval of minutes, but I do know that Alexandria has been out since our last meeting, so we don't have minutes from our last meeting. So I assume that Alexandria will be working on that and get us that very soon. She did send us out in an email just the correction from our last meeting. We had date and time missing, so we will just expect last meeting and this meeting in minutes when we meet next. So thank you. Alrighty, so we're on to the final review of the portion of the RFP. We spent a fair amount of time at our last meeting, which was a week ago Thursday, and I appreciate, Jericho, you taking our notes and putting it into format. Has everyone had a chance to review the document? And I don't know if you can put that up on the screen, Jericho.
Will do.
Thank you.
And I'm going to move this to the big screen, even though it's just me and Alexander.
Okay. All righty. Does anyone on the committee have comments to start with? I do have a question, and it's just where you got your asterisks under the organizational data. For example, grants received, so the appropriate time periods will be filled in for the RFP.
So my intent here is to have this be as close to unchanging from year to year as possible. And then when I format this in the final RFP, I would like to keep this section here. So this would actually be F year -3. It's cumbersome if I'm trying if it would be something that would need to get updated every year, and I could just pull this out and use it to compare apples to apples if I have if I do like a more formula-ish one, then with a example right here,
Mm-hmm.
just as a table formatting thing.
Okay.
Also, when I was writing this, and admittedly, I was in a fever state for a chunk of that, this seemed to make more sense to me as an as an explicit example of what the thing is.
Okay, but when the RFP is actually produced, it will have dates in there, so the bidders will see the exact dates that we're looking at. You're just
So
using that as a placeholder right now.
I didn't intend to, although if you would like to make sure that this has current grants received FY20, this would be, so previous, I can just change this to total grants received previous FY to total grants received FY 24, 23, and 22.
I just find that we understand what this is, but I'm trying to look at this through the eyes of just someone this has fallen in their lap and understanding what it is. And I don't, I think it needs to be explicit.
Yeah,
Okay.
but without context, I have no idea what this is trying to say.
I would be keeping these asterisks in on the final if we went that way, but it definitely seems like I should just change those to the explicit fiscal year, which I will do right now.
I appreciate that.
No, not a problem.
I also think it should say the are we looking, I'm trying to remember, is this for comparison to the CRC grants they received in the past or for all grants? Because that needs to be
This
clarified.
one was all grants.
Then it needs to say that, or it needs to say any grants your organization received, because that's the part that's not clear.
Yes.
Yeah, it can say inclusive of CRC or something.
Yeah, they have to be explicit. We need to look through the eyes of someone who has never seen anything, and otherwise, we're not going to get the information we want.
I mean, aren't we also gonna have like a meeting with these people and go through how to do this?
Yes, yes. We'll discuss that when we go on, but we're going to be doing a bidders information session, and then Jericho also will be holding office hours at a specific time for people either who haven't been able to come to the session or that may have maybe one additional one-on-one.
Okay.
But the more explicit we can be here, the better we are.
I agree.
Yeah.
So my thought on all grants received FY24, CRC inclusive, I think we keep the CRC inclusive. I would just grab the amount awarded previous year. That's a relatively trivial thing to put together. So when we do the final report, we can present a number that is how much of their total grant budget is CRC. If the only
Correct.
grant they receive is CRC, that would be 100 and so on.
Yeah. So then I think you should pull out of the 24. I think the CRC, I think we should put an extra line in there and say, how much did you get from the CRC in 24? And what was the all grants number?
So
It's just gonna be easier for us if it's
Okay.
on this sheet than for us to have to look up how much they got that year.
Right.
I mean, that was really the purpose of this whole sheet, is so that we can start our analysis with the same information from everyone. And we don't, because these are mostly questions we were asking at the interviews, right?
Exactly.
And so this way we're gonna have a sheet where they're answered these in advance, and it's the same questions for everyone, and that should make our deliberation process a lot easier.
Right. And with the committee's approval, I think I would like to, of course, we all will read all of the grant applications, but we will then also assign specific applications to a committee member to dive deep in. So this information will be just double checked. So when we sit down and meet, we know that we are all looking at the right information.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, we're just watching what you're doing here.
So we wanted the previous 3 years. Did
Yep.
I miss received, really? I before E, except after C. Sounds like A, get what I say. And I'll clean up the extra cells in a second,
Okay.
offline. And then I'll make a similar change to this number in previous fiscal year, FY -2 and FY -3. Are we okay with this clarification? Served, reached, or otherwise engaged? We have a lot of irregular shaped programs. And if it's a service delivery program, that would be one number. If it's an outreach program, that would be a number. I wanted to have the broadest possible scope that a program could get. Inclusive rather than exclusive.
All right, so it says anticipated program reach, and in parentheses, you have people served with the asterisk, and it means served, reached, or otherwise engaged. So we're trying to get a picture of who they anticipate reaching, and it could be
How many in this case?
how
The
many.
end-
So it could be 12 teenagers, or it could be the entire island population. So does that really say what we want?
Because of how varied the programming here is, I
would say specific to the grant, where you have the asterisk and it says served, reach, or otherwise engaged. I would just add like 3 specific to the grant.
So that would be specific to the grant, the program.
Yeah,
Was how I was thinking of that. So it would be,
right. But what we don't want people doing, like, I'm just thinking,
the whole, everyone that.
yes, the whole organization. Like, we're not, that's not what we're going for. Program supported by the grant. That's fine,
Mm-hmm.
right?
And okay, sweet.
Because otherwise people, to Veronica's point, otherwise people are gonna say the whole island, right?
Yeah,
Right, right.
and we wanted, oops. And that is why we have the undo button. And we wanted 3 years. So no, yeah.
Yeah.
If it's an ongoing program, okay.
Yes. And I think the reason there is we want to see if there's been growth, if there's been a change. So
I
we
think
can
that-
look back.
I think that when we do the provider information session, we should make sure that, because this thing could imply this could disincentivize new programming, which is what we don't want it to do. So I think when we communicate to them that if it's an ongoing program, and then we'll have to pattern that into the rubric when we discuss that, as a way to kind of balance that. If it's a new program, they're gonna have 3 slots not filled here.
Right. They
Right.
would just put not applicable, NA.
And we want to caution them when they're conceiving of their application that it's not gonna, or not caution, we want to make sure they're not worried that we're only trying to support multiple, like, existing program.
Right.
Mhm.
Okay,
And actually, maybe this is time to talk about this. We, of course, this has to be the grant application has to be advertised in the Inky. Will you also be able to get some real estate on the town website and have the help of, is it Florencia? And
I will, the only area of the webpage I can speak for is the Health and Human Services page. I'm gonna ask Florencia to post it on social media, and I'm gonna ask her to put a banner link on the main page. But I cannot guarantee or ensure that that happens.
okay, in that message, we want to make sure that we encourage new program applications and also all age programs. So, you know, birth through end of life.
This raises an interesting question about what the committee would like to do with the substance misuse funds. Do we want to run that? So we can run this as an undifferentiated 875,000 using a single application process. I think that we should maintain the 175 split for substance misuse and limit applications to that. But originally that money was funded by impact costs collected from dispensaries and limited specifically to the use for substance misuse programming by the agreements between the dispensaries and the town. That agreement was ruled illegal by state law, and we no longer collect those monies. The current 175 comes from the Special Stabilization Fund, which is a different supply with different use limitations. That said, I believe it would be a bad idea this year to do a radical change like that in days before we're releasing these grants. So my suggestion is that I would make this make a second RFP as we did in previous years for substance misuse.
And the same, of course, the same application can be used for both, but it is a separate group of programming that we will examine in a separate pile and not be put together. I personally would like it that way.
Right, you know we're giving, sorry, I have to move around a little bit. You know
Okay.
that we're giving money to the same places.
Right.
For the same things, and so there is an element of redundancy here. Right, and
Agreed.
then, you know, this is further complicated by these same organizations, you know, a lot of them just got money from the Community Foundation Nantucket Fund, right? I went to the ceremony, what was it, 2 nights ago, and basically saw the same places that we give money, all getting money from them, which is great, right? But it goes to this whole point of we're not aligned with and we will work on this because I talked to Sunny about it. We need to better align in our grant making because we're essentially what's happening is people are applying for money from the both places and which is again fine, but it's for the same types of thing. And so I think that we need to figure out how to make all of our combined money go further.
And I think that is something we need to dedicate sufficient time to doing, not right now. That's my only real concern.
I totally agree. I mean, I don't think that the questions we're asking on this particular thing are going to be any different for the other $175,000. It's just the program parameters should be different, and they need to understand that they can't apply for the same program from the 2 pots of money.
Yeah, and I think that is something we need to communicate out during the communication sessions.
Yeah.
I mean, just to very briefly digress on the aligning the various grant options, it's been a dream or idea of mine to have a unified application process across a couple of different grant funding organizations, CFN included. And I would very much like to have increased collaboration and participation with them going forward on this.
Oh, well, so Jericho, she and I had a good talk about it, and we're gonna have like an initial meeting And then I'm gonna, well, I mentioned this last time, I'm gonna invite her to come to this meeting and talk about it. But I said to her the other night, I said, you know, one of the goals would be for us to have almost like a common app that they do for the college process.
Yes. No,
Yes.
without a doubt. And they recently got like last year and a half, 2 years, they got a full dedicated grant application tracking and monitoring platform that would reduce the amount of time and effort it takes to administer our grants and do the reporting on our grants tremendously. Plus would mean that you would enter one application across 5 or 6 different grant funding, like funding sources.
Yeah.
And then that we could just pretty seamlessly direct grants that don't hit our criteria to other funding sources that may. So
Yeah.
for example, that Housing for Humanity grant request we got.
Right,
Yeah.
Habitat.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah. But
that
I
would be
will,
some-
I will say that listening to all the other grant applications and acceptances, people are applying to that fund for the same things they're applying to our fund for. And so I'll just pick on the food and fuel and the food pantry. They're just trying to get as much money as they can from whatever funding sources are available to support their projects on Nantucket. And I think that the conversation needs to go to the place of, okay, if we're gonna, I mean, and no surprise to anyone on this call, we're funding them year over year for years, right? Food and fuel and food pantry. So is the Nantucket Fund. So how do we then figure out a way to combine this and because the other thing that I'm really interested in doing is giving these organizations an incentive to raise their own money. And that's not happening. So if we are able to partner with Community Fund and say, okay, well, we're going to give you 25,000, they're going to give you 25,000, but we'll each give you $10,000 more if you match it, right? So that there's a built-in or baked-in incentive to raise money, because that's not happening, and that is a problem.
One tiny thing on that is that unlike the community fund, we have some statute limitations to
Yeah.
how we can
Right.
reimburse, which is
Right.
another reason why I would like to partner with a private funding
Yes.
source. So
Yes.
we can be more flexible in how we fund programming. I'm done.
Right.
That's my piece.
Tara,
Yeah.
I'll get you 1 second, Tara, but I think that what we're doing with this chart here,
Yes.
that we see what they applied for, what they received, it actually, initially I was saying, oof, our timing is off, but it actually is good. If the organization has gotten, $25,000 from Community Fund, we know that, and we can take that all into consideration. So we're backing into it, but I think in the future there may be a better way of doing this.
Yep.
All right.
Yep.
Tara?
I was going to say one way that you could address it is actually just simply adding a question that says, are you requesting funds from any additional source for this program?
Yep.
And in addition, you could also say, have you requested funds for this program in previous years from us? So that gives you some of the backstory on that. That would allow you to kind of understand where else they're applying for. And that in part, if, for example, if you ask the question, and I think you do this later, what happens to this program if you don't get funding from us? That potentially is the reason, obviously, for people to ask multiple sources, but you could be very direct and say, have you requested funds for this program previously? And, are you requesting funds from any additional sources for this program this fiscal year? And then that addresses any of the concerns that you might have with that. And I do agree, Joanna, about trying to get people to look for alternative sources. There is one thing you might want to consider, which is a limitation in the number of years that somebody is allowed to ask for funds for a specific program, sort of maybe limit it to 3 years or something to that effect.
Yeah.
Just
So
Yeah, Tara,
s-
we've discussed that, I think at our last meeting we did, because there are some, as opposed to necessarily a program, we seem to be funding organizations and, without the incentive to be looking elsewhere. So, we've talked about putting a time limit, for specific request.
Well, or we have to decide that that is part of the town's,
Mission. Yeah,
yes.
I just wanted to pop in and say that for our grant cycle, as people are planning in the future, the CRC grant is kind of the first, is an early one on the calendar, depending on how you look at things. Like, when did we turned in the community foundation grant in like July? And it comes out in September. So that is almost like this current operating year funding people might be thinking of those funds as, whereas the CRC grant doesn't fund until July. So I'm not saying this is true for all organizations, but some new programs, they may not have applied for other funding yet
right.
because they're just conceiving of it now because it can't launch until after July 1.
So you're basically saying that the community foundation and our, giving cycles are different.
Correct.
Community foundation, the money is awarded now and they get the money as of October 1st. Is that how it
Mhm.
works?
Everybody walked away with the check that night.
Okay,
So that's where the statutory limitations on dispersal come in, which is that we can only reimburse after receipt or delivery of service or goods. Plus, we have a budget cycle that requires us to have a much larger lead up. Those are entirely out of scope for this committee. Those are things that we went within.
Yeah, I'm not suggesting we change that. I'm just saying when we read that they haven't applied for grants for this program, if that's what they write, it may not, it may be a yet.
okay.
It may not be a, we're not going to, it's just, we're starting here.
Okay, but in the bidders information session, we need to make that clear that if they've received that, it goes on this chart as monies received. We're looking in the future, but that money is there, so we'll have a sense for what they've gotten, and we assume that if they've been
Oh.
successful, they're gonna do it again,
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, I think they're getting the money in the same cycle. So for example, Addiction Solutions, who we gave money to last year, right? The only difference, I think, and this is what Jericho is trying to say, is ours is a reimbursable grant. So they have to spend the money first and then we pay them back. At the community foundation, they hand them the check for the whole amount and then they have to submit some reports. But for example, last year, Addiction Solutions, who we gave some money to, they're getting that money. It was in the FY24 budget. They can get those expenses reimbursed anytime in the FY24 in 2024. So if they also got a grant 2 nights ago for $25,000, they're getting that grant in 2024. Right? This is how these organizations are funding their operations. And some of these organizations are very small, right? I mean, the food pantry, fuel and rental stuff, like they need this money to run their programs. I think the question we have with some of this is we want to know truly if the money we're giving is going through to fund programs or is it funding their overhead? And that's what we're trying to tease out of some of this. And that's why we're trying to make them a little bit more accountable so that the money the town is giving is truly supporting the needs of the community.
Right. Right. At what point do we try to change, and it's not parameters, but, make that clear? Well, first of all, we'd have to make sure we know what the town monies actually can be used for. That, you know, if someone comes and says, I'm using this money to pay for my overhead, is that appropriate? Or, you know, does it get put in a big pot of money and they pay bills and they salaries and buy food and pay for people's rent out of a big pot of money? So at one point, do we make firmer rules on that?
My
Mhm.
suggestion would be this spring. Because one of the issues is that we do not have clearly delineated roles between CHS and CRC and staff. And we don't have clearly outlined areas of responsibility for all of the different members. And as a result, based on the reading of the charter, priority setting is supposed to be, the town charter and bylaws that created CHS and CRC.
Mhm.
Based on a reading of those, there is a differentiation of responsibilities. The CRC is primarily intended to be more tightly focused on the nuts and bolts of going through reports and managing quarterly reports and quarterly invoices. The CHS is supposed to be setting up what the priorities for each year is, and then getting and maintaining a sense of the needs on the island to constrain what the CRC wants. Another discussion that we may have then is going to be, do we need to have a differentiated CRC and CHS? Which one of the recommendations from the committee, and one of the things they found from the consultants, was that we are unique in the fact that we have two bodies covering this, as opposed to one body. So I personally think that a differentiation is a good idea, if it's properly managed and constrained. But I also think that we need to have a proper discussion when we don't have an RFP to be released in 48 business hours.
Right.
And we don't have a full 2 grant cycles to run in the next 3 months, using a radically different to previous year's application process. That's probably a better time to do it.
Okay. And this will also be talked about on October 7th. That'll be part of the discussion that we have with the consultants and with all parties involved. So at this point, status quo then.
It's gonna be important to remember that this is what we're working on right now is not status quo. This is
Oh,
the
no.
single largest and most radical change in this program in over 30 years, since its inception. And it's gonna be received that way by individuals in the community who have been applying to this. So this is gonna be a big shock when this comes out.
What help me understand that, Jericho. What's the shock? The shock is this form that they're gonna have to fill out?
That, among the fact that we're asking these questions explicitly, we're holding a community's information session. It'll be a shock in a lot of good ways and a lot of bad ways. But these are organizations that have been relying on this funding in the way that it has been released and in the way that it has been allocated for many years. And this is a significant change that is going to not necessarily provoke alarm, but it's going to provoke attention. And I think that we should stage the changes in a way that gets the collaborators on board with us in how we're doing it, gets them engaged in improving the process along with it, and then ends up with that collaboration between us, other grant funding agencies, nonprofits that rely on us, and outside agencies. So it's, you know, this is what you need to figure out to make your next year's budget for a lot of these places. So it's gonna get a lot of attention and a lot of concern, and I'm not worried about it, but I think we should acknowledge that as we're doing this.
Okay.
That's
I mean,
all.
I just from my perspective, I feel like we asked these questions, like we asked them a bulk of these questions last year. We just figured them out ourselves. And when I put this together, what I was trying to do was manage our time more efficiently so that we are able to, and evaluate the grants on the same information from everyone.
Yeah.
Oh, no, I agree. I definitely agree.
Yeah, and I agree with that also. And I think that for the organizations that we asked a lot of these questions, they should remember But for the smaller organizations and the startups, this may be a little off-putting. So I think that information session is going to be really important for them, that don't be frightened by
Right.
the level of detail that we're asking, we
Well, I
want you to.
also, I think that this also helps us to deploy the money to places that can use it successfully. Because the other problem is if we're, if we're, like, I don't know, I don't want to get too far off track because I also have a time limit this morning. But
Yeah.
like, for example, like, I don't know what happened to that whole horseback riding program we funded, right? And I'm not, like, had we had these questions, I say I really wanted to fund that program because it was different and I felt like it accommodated a lot of kids and it served the needs of what we were trying to do, but I don't know how successful it was. And I feel like, do you know,
I have good news for you.
Oh, that's really good.
She just sent in her final reporting structure from the Youth Behavioral Health Grant. She has a lot of the self-reported data. She actually gave me the raw data on a bunch of it. It was it's impossible to gauge the success of a program like this in a single year, but she passed thresholds that organizations we have funded for many years did not pass in terms of measuring an improvement in self-reported, like measuring data from people using it. She had pretty good uptake. She managed to get the kids to and from in the summertime. And she spent down her grant all the way to the very end. And I've been looking for ways to get bridge funding together to maintain a couple more sessions of that. But there's issues around how to do that in the best and most reliable way. But that is an excellent point. What we haven't been doing is making it simple and efficient for the agencies to report back to us and for them to do their like for them to execute the things that they claim to do. We need to work better on that on our end as well. And I think that's why we need to like sit down, dedicate a chunk of time to ironing out the whole structure. And I think that these are definitely the things that, like, when we do the spring thing, what I would like to build in is that I would like the consultants to be able to share what they discovered about how other areas do impact metrics and effectiveness metrics and efficiency metrics.
Okay.
Because they did compare, like, there are not necessarily templates, but there are systems that we can adopt or use as influence. I just genuinely think we need to take that part slow so that when we build something solid and we can iterate on top of that foundation.
Right. I agree. I think that the people who I think that the philosophical issue that we're going to have that's going to get dealt with this year is, and that's really going to be, I think, from your committee, Veronica,
Yes.
is, does the town of Nantucket and does the Council on Human Services want to fund operational budgets for some of the larger healthcare providers? And if they do, we need to know going in here that there's 300,000 that, because I would strongly advocate that we limit the amount of money we give them, and that we go into each grant cycle saying, okay, we have $875,000, but we've made a commitment that we're supporting the operational budget of X, Y, and Z organizations at $100,000. They're level funded. That's what they're going to get. We've made that commitment for 3 years, and then they have to reapply. Like, that's how that kind of funding works.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
We've been doing that kind of in not an official capacity, right? And we've been this is what's caused some of the conflict, right? Is that's what we've been doing, but that's not really what they've been asking for or reporting on.
Right. Right. We've sort of backed into that as
Yes.
opposed to going in at the beginning. This is what we're going to be doing. Right. So
right.
Your application.
Yes. And that type of a grant is called a capacity building grant.
Okay.
Right. So when you invest in the operations of an organization, you're building their capacity. And people typically do that over a period of 3 years. Right. That way, an organization can count on the fact that they're getting $100,000 over the next 3 years to support their operations. Now, eventually, what happens after that grant term is up is the funder typically looks and says, where are you going to raise this money from? Right, which is different than giving a program-related grant.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
So if I
This
can,
is, can I just say, I am very excited that we are doing this because I feel like this is a gigantic leap for our committee, right? And for Nantucket to really put funds to use in a way that's going to help these organizations, that we can all feel good about it and that we're applying the metrics fairly. So I think this is like so awesome.
Yeah.
I agree wholeheartedly, and I would love to put in our, the long list of things we do in the spring and plan for is that we provide the community with like an annual impact report with what we've done with their dollars and what these programs have achieved.
Yes, yes,
That-
like an annual report, yes.
That needs to go out so that as we've discussed, having the requests far exceed the funds we have available. When we prove that good things are coming to the citizens and people on Nantucket because of the funding we're able to provide, that will perhaps encourage the select board and the tax base to increase the amount of funding we have to give. But
Because
I'll
it's the select board, but it also is the general public. And I'm just, thrilled that at annual town meeting, when there's, is it warrant 9 or whatever
Yep.
one it is, that we're just in there and no one has gotten up on the floor to say,
Chop us.
we don't know
right?
what you're doing with that money. We need to be proactive in telling people what's happened so we don't get slammed and turned down, which is always a possibility. So more information is the rule.
Yep, like this is really great progress.
And I'll go one step more than Sue. We have soft commitment from the select board to reevaluate the funding levels
Yep.
of this organization.
absolutely,
If
yeah.
we implement the results of this, this study.
Yeah.
There are going to be tons of complications because it's public money, and public money is complicated to use. But I do think this is really good. I think it'll incentivize participation from new agencies, covering new demographics, providing new services. There are ways for us to make this much more
Yep.
responsive to the needs. But also I would like to point out, we are getting towards the halfway mark, and we have yet to look at the rubric. Which I'm just now concerned because I want to make sure I can get this out on time because I
Okay.
think there are people looking forward to it now.
Yes.
I
Okay.
appreciate that. Did we vote? Do we need to make an official vote to segment $175,000 for the
I would
the
feel
old
more,
cannabis funds?
yes, I would feel more comfortable going to finance to discuss that if we had, yes.
Okay. Would someone like to make a motion to continue with 2 separate grant application proceeds? What 650
Processes.
for human services and 175 for substance misuse?
I so move.
I
I will-
second.
Okay. Sue Mithonen,
Aye.
Joanna,
Aye.
John,
Aye.
and myself, I. So we've made that official. All right. Thank you.
Well, thank you guys.
All right.
I'm
So
like, let's move that point on and
Yes. And let's go back to just the final of this so we can get on to the rubric. If you can move that down, thank you.
I believe we touched on 6. I added, one of the elements from the discussion we had on the RFP last time was a desire for an empirical measurement of what the need is, or at least an attempt I'm sorry, not of what the need is, of what the goal and the success is.
Right.
I, in my fever-driven, decision-making process, decided to italicize measure, and I think that we should be using that measure verb when we do the communication out, because we would like for them to be giving us information or preferably data that would allow them, that's how they're making their decision of whether it's beneficial or not. So that they're pre-lodging basically what they want to see as a success for this, because there's a chance if you don't pre-lodge your conclusion, basically, that
Right.
at the end of the period, you're like, oh, well, let's figure out what the thing is. This is kind of letting us know, and sharing with us the metric of success or failure for the program ahead of time, and that it has to be something collected or measured. Ideally a metric of some sort, or like, you know,
Even if it's just a pre-post survey or, you know, increased satisfaction one way or another. I had no problem with the way this is worded. And once again, in the information session, we will explain exactly what this means if people don't understand. But I think that the wording was good. So thank you. Anyone else? All right.
No.
Okay.
Veronica, I have to go in like 2 minutes.
Okay.
So is
we
there
will-
anything else today that's
Oh.
urgent?
Well, we're gonna go through the rubric.
Okay.
And,
I
you know,
thought
we
that-
will
I
do
thought the
that.
rubric was fine, yeah.
And then, what we're also gonna do is set some dates. But, for the committee, this 9 o'clock on Friday morning time, we established that as our regular time. So,
Correct.
we'll just fill you in, Joanna. So appreciate your time this morning.
Are we doing 9 o'clock every Friday? Is that what we're doing, or is it every other?
I don't think it's every Friday as needed. Um, you know, and I'm not sure at this point, looking at the calendar, of when the next time we need to be meeting.
Okay.
So I don't think it's not going to be every Friday going forth, but we'll have some more discussion with that, and I'll let you know, Joanna. But
Okay, great.
All right.
So if she leaves, we lose quorum.
Correct.
So here's, I kind of questioned this before, but my understanding is that since we are advisory and not regulatory, is that right?
We
Yes.
are advisory.
That once, as long as you establish the quorum, that you can continue on even if someone leaves.
That's been my understanding as
Okay.
well. It just leaves the meeting open. It also means that if there's any vote that needs to happen, it will not be countable. So the only real, we don't need a vote on the rubric. We don't, so we can continue to discuss this, and then I can share the final product out. It's, for me, it's just the timing issue of making sure this gets out in a timely fashion. So that's my only concern about, like, one extra layer of confirm and reply. But I can send you the finalized rubric over the weekend. If there's anything that sticks out, I can make adoptions. I'll send it out. I cannot get votes through email, but I can ask if you approve. And then that should be sufficient for releasing these things.
Okay, that's fine with me. Okay,
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you,
thank,
Joanna.
thank you, everybody. Talk
Thank
soon.
you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
What time is it?
It
All right. So
9 minutes.
finishing with these questions, any other comments? Or are we done with this portion? And
I am satisfied.
I have no other questions. I do appreciate the effort that you put in taking our 2-hour conversation of last week and arrows, and because I look at what I started with, which is, you know, looks like scribbling all over, and you condensed it. So appreciate your effort in doing this.
Weirdly enough, it was a genuine pleasure. Like, I
right.
really liked putting this together and getting the ideas in a like very concrete section.
Okay,
Ah.
I think I was gonna say something inappropriate, so I'm not gonna say that. Because, because if you really like this, we're gonna give you more.
Yeah, no, well, also do remember that I was feverish and homesick for some of it, so that might have influenced my enjoyment.
Right, but also it probably was good that you were out of the office and you could just concentrate and look at this, because that was always my frustration of starting and having to stop every 5 minutes when someone stuck their head in and the phone rang, etc. So, thank you.
Actually helpful. So with your permission, I'd like to move on to the rubric
Yes, please.
section. Before we get into the existing, or before we get into some of the suggestions, I had suggestions from a variety of members, including John's, that were specific to the rubric. Before we get into the suggestions, I would love to constrain the output so that we are gonna have a working document. Like, what I'd like for us to look at the currently existing one, decide what we want for a rubric, and then fill in the sections, if that makes sense. Like, find the weaknesses in the currently existing rubric and then use the rubric ideas or the suggestions from the members to fill those gaps in. Cause like,
Okay,
for example, here, like, this is the suggestions are like this, there's a lot of these suggestions. And I think that this HAANAU is adopted standard measures and was suggested to us by finance. I would like to keep this rating system. And then these, something similar, the general outline of these kinds of questions, of these kinds of rubric questions. And then I'd like for us to think about what the correct highly advantageous, advantageous, not advantageous, unadvantageous is. Because otherwise we could have an 85 question long rubric very easy.
right, we don't want that. Okay,
Um,
all right, do you have all, did we receive all of the comments to putting that together?
I did, I think I sent these out to everybody. These were from that initial round of requests. Some of these are similar to the ones that we had. I know, John, you sent me the email with,
I can find it.
yeah, no, this is it here. Oh, here we go. No, these are John's comments. I think these were yours, Sue.
That looks familiar.
And then these were suggested replacement questions for the rubric from I believe from Dorothy.
Yeah.
So my initial idea for this is that these were set up to rate the questions, or rate the answers we asked for the like, this is a grading rubric for the RFP's narrative answers. That's what this rubric is.
Mhm.
The existing one. It's not a separate rating system. It's a way to make explicit what our ideas of the quality or advantageousness of the submitted questions is. Does that make sense? And
Say
are
that
we
again.
okay? So this is not an independent rating system. This is not separate from the RFP. This is the scoring of the answers we receive
Right.
on the RFP. It makes explicit and numeric what our opinions are of the particular answers on the RFP. Last year, when we deployed this initially, due to timing constraints, I didn't get a chance to really explain what I was doing with this.
Yeah.
And I think that this is the suggestion that finance and Brian specifically gave me in terms of how to constrain the rubric questions, is that they are an evaluation. And an explication of the questions from the RFP. They don't have to be the exact same questions that we just decided here, like we don't need 10 with these things, we don't need a rubric answer based on attach or paste. But this is why we're asking those questions in the RFP process and how good of an answer we thought they were.
Okay.
Does
Because
that make sense? Or no?
Yes, makes sense to me.
okay. So we should go one by one with what we have and then jump to suggestions of others. Would that be a good way to attack this?
That would be my suggestion.
Okay.
I think we should go through here and yank anything that does not work initially.
Okay.
John and Bert last year had some very good concerns about how these were structured. So for example, this was the one that jumped out right away.
Yeah.
Who will this program serve? So this one is basically how much detail did they put in their summary? Do we have a good idea of what they're going to be spending the money on? Does it anticipate our questions? Is it transparent? Do we understand the program, what it's going to be doing, who's going to be doing what, and so on? This is the general, like, did you include the full heading that your teacher asked you to put on the essay? Is it properly formatted? All of those kinds of questions.
Did you write a good application?
Kind of, like on the mechanics of it, not its necessary content, but its completeness and descriptiveness.
Right. But by the time, I guess I'm struggling with this because we get an application in, we go deep in asking questions or visiting the program, et cetera, and then we will call them in for additional questions. So by the time we go through those 3 separate or 4 separate things, we should all have a good feel of, did they just give us the proposed program described? And so I guess it's appropriate to keep this, because if at the end of all of our steps, we should feel comfortable. And if not, then it's a NA. Correct?
That is how I viewed it. This is currently your guys. Like this is
Right.
do you all, I mean, if you agree with that, we stick with this.
So we're using the rubric with the application and the interview in combination?
I'm yes.
Okay. Then yes, I think this first question makes a ton of sense
Right.
to evaluate
Now,
this manner.
finally, the next thing that just for procedurally I'd like to mention is that this HA, NA, and U, HA is like 100 on a test. It's an A++. Like the numerical scoring, you're not allowed to put just straight numerical scoring on these grant requests. It's a legality thing.
Okay.
But U is a disqualifier almost. A U would be a 0. This would be something like in a numerical grading, a 50. This would be a 80, and this would be like outstanding 100%. Like not advantageous means makes me not inclined to support this. Advantageous means makes me more likely to support this. Highly advantageous is that but more. But do these answers work for you guys? Description is complete, robust, and descriptive. Clearly, this is redundant.
Services.
And remember, we'll have a discussion in the evaluation where we go through these terms and we agree on what we mean by each one of them. And that should be contextual based on what everybody else, what the total process is. Like the rubrics are still holistic. We'll have a better understanding of that year's applicants after having done the review. This is just putting all of that work into a HAA, NA, or U.
Okay. I think we're okay. From my point.
I don't have any further comment on that.
Right.
Agreed.
Okay. All right, so let's go to the next.
So.
This is problematic.
Exactly. I was attempting to get at HA being like the absolute best you could do with the broadness of a program is everybody. But I clearly did not land that one correctly. So as to the criteria, be specific. I obviously this is the broadness, the applicability of all of the programs, right? Like we have one of our desires is to have programming that applies to the most number of people it possibly can.
But
Question
the
mark,
problem
sorry.
is that we may have great need in a small portion of our population, and that's part of what we need to address also. So
So
numbers are a tricky thing. So I would rather see a question relating to the need. And I'm not,
so that is here. And I
yeah,
think this brings up a second thing that we need to keep in mind when we talk about rubrics. No single one of these captures the total of them. We need to balance the different rubric responses to the different competing needs that these programs have.
right,
So one of the criteria by which we judge is how big of a target population they have. The other one is how severe is that need? And we can never rely on any one of these criteria to determine the value of a whole thing. Sorry, I'm droning on because I spent a lot of time thinking about this.
right.
So
You're
do
not
we want-
recommending a change for this program service population in terms of has it identified and clearly identified its target? Is that better or is that still missing the mark?
I think that is the question, like, who will this program serve is, what I would suggest is that this is a question we say, like, highly advantageous answer would be program clearly identifies target population and number, possibly. If it is a program that has a very specific target and they have a good idea of what that target is, then that would be a highly advantageous answer. Go ahead, John.
Well, I have a problem. I'll just pick a perfect problem. The food pantry. It targets the entire population. And we have unfortunately come to understand it's a much bigger proportion and one that is not readily identifiable in advance, because all of a sudden you have people that you have no expectation needing to go to the food pantry.
Right.
And I picked that just as an example. I mean, it's the same thing. I have the same problem with the general term drug opioid problem. It targets the whole population. We can't, until they show up on the door of who's providing the services, they really don't, they can't tell you who's going to be or how big the problem is going to be. And that's why I have a problem using this in terms of a rating. I don't know how we do it better, and maybe I'd be happy to sit down and try and do it better, but that wasn't my assignment, I didn't think.
Right.
But I just picked a couple of examples that just hit me so hard that I had trouble making it work within this rubric.
And I think that's a solid
Agreed.
point.
Yeah.
What I would do here, my suggestion on this would be program clearly identifies a target population. The highly advantageous response Because remember, the highly advantageous, we should be grading most of our responses. Just the calibration of this rubric is that most organizations will fall in A or NA. And that's the same across all of these questions.
Mhm.
My suspicion on the best way to resolve this is that we want to know how broad, we want to rate how broad and net and how broad and tight, I'm murdering this metaphor.
It has to do with their outreach too, like how, it's not a secret program, but are they looking for everyone in that need category? So I'm looking at the ratings where it says program serves entire population. Would it be better if we say program serves entire target population as opposed to the entire population of Nantucket, because it's the target population. Now, if you ask, and back to John's point, like how many people are food insecure, it varies, and you know, by the grace of God, we're not there, having to do it, but it could be any of us could wind up that we need a service. So rather than the entire population of Nantucket, the entire target population.
That makes more sense to me because, yeah, whether you're talking about, homelessness or victim or, survivors of domestic violence, like we just want to make sure they're trying to be available to everybody who could fall into that category.
Right.
Right. Like, and maybe for some services, that is the entire population of Nantucket.
Right.
But
I mean, so in my head, a program that has a few number of people, but that is entirely served by the program we're funding would be a highly advantageous one.
correct.
So I think that is, I'm just restating in other words what Sue just said.
Right.
My only suggestion is like a copy editor tweak of affected population of Nantucket. I don't like targeted in there for whatever reason.
Yeah.
We can then just simply go down the line. Program serves a significant portion of the affected population. So this or parents thereof was a relic, because this rubric was originally deployed as part of the youth behavioral health grant.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
And we just didn't have time last year to get it changed consistently across the board.
Yeah.
My suggestion here, program serves significant portion of the affected island. Oops, geez. Island population.
Yeah.
I'm gonna just portion of the
Yeah.
of the island's affected population.
Right.
And then measurable here is the wrong term to use, because measurable we're using elsewhere to be literally something that they measure by survey or whatever.
Right.
If you guys have an adjective that you would like to modify portion with.
Because we have entire significant, could it say something just, smaller portion?
Less than half. I don't know.
Can you
Right.
say considerable?
Well,
I would
this is actually going down a step, so it would be
Yeah.
less.
Oh, less.
So,
Okay.
so like smaller, I think how about a portion of the island's affected population, unacceptable, sort of small or overserved
Okay.
portion. I'm
Right.
gonna remove overserved because we're asking that question
Right.
elsewhere. And then I will add the the indefinite article. John, does this address your concerns?
I think I think it does as well as we can. I think as we go along, we may I mean, at least I'm more comfortable with this than I was with what I started with. And I think as we work with it, we may find we want to tweak it some, but I think makes a good running start at getting to where we'd like to be.
One important
Agreed.
constraint about this is that this rubric is included in the agreement. So we cannot change the terms by which we are grading them in the same year that we release it. So when we release this RFP out, we can't change the wording of these during that year. We can change it at the end of the year and evaluate to see how it worked.
Right.
I think that's a perfect valid point, but that's fine. I think we wouldn't be able to, I certainly wouldn't be able to change my point of view until after we'd had a year's experience in any event. And so the idea is that we just remember we may want to come back and look at this a year from now and see after a year of working with it that we're still happy or we could improve it.
Exactly. Exactly. I remember filling out or doing the rubric last year. This question it didn't apply. And I think what we've come up with now is closer. And once again, in the bidders information session, explaining people what we're looking for and that we all understand it, I think we've got a place to start. And we'll evaluate this at the end of the year and tweak it. So.
Criteria 3, describe the need served by the program and methods used to determine that need. I'm gonna change this to not just be the same text as a previous one, but maybe demonstration of need. So, need is urgent, pressing, and unserved by other resources. Measured evidence exists to support the scale and prevalence. Is that? This is the one that
I have problem with the term measured because how do you measure your general impression of people who are exposed to the opioids? I mean, in other words, the problem with the target population is in some cases it's more amorphous than others. I mean, the Meals on Wheels, they can go out, they can pretty well measure it by the terms of just people who appear at their door, and it's a well-known service. But some of these others are, well, food dependence. It's we can't tell from 3 months from now who's going to be impacted by that. You know, it's the problem is the measured evidence for me.
Yeah, without a proper needs assessment, it's really hard to use the word measured and expect people to, I mean, we haven't even given them any measurements.
The ideal response or ideal presentation would be a grant that addresses an identified need that has measurements that support the extent of the need. And advantageous would be anecdotal or limited statistical evidence. Non-advantageous is need is limited, applies over limited anecdotal and no statistical evidence of the need. My suggestion is to keep some gradation of demonstration, some empirical demonstration of the need, some measurement, some not necessarily surveys. Like, while I agree that we have real difficulty measuring certain problems, not having an incentive for the applicants to measure the scope of the problem built in is how we get sort of, how we lose or drift. Because we can have all of the opinions we want and we can know that there's a problem out, but until we measure it, we don't have a good idea of its shape or the amount of resources necessary to balance it. The primary reason I added this is because there is significant pressure from fiscal, like from constraining fiscal or quasi austerian notions of how public spending should go, that empirical verifiable data is something that you must have to receive grant support. Most grant requests outside of the town require there to be very extensive statistical, measured, observed need. When we have a needs assessment, and we should start training people to think in terms of the needs assessment that we're going to be running, that is my argument for why I think that we can tweak the language on all of these so that we're more comfortable with what it means, but that we should have a gradation of the level of need and how we have gotten there, because that will help these agencies apply for grants elsewhere. And it will also help us make the case to FinCom to increase, or to FinCom admin select board to increase funding. These are the questions they'll be asking of us. How do you know?
Right.
And there are many ways to know things, and I think we want to capture that.
So you're
think-
saying
I
keep
think-
the bar set high
Yeah.
and hope our applicants and the town rise to it.
All right.
Yep.
I
But
think the
remember-
problem I have with this is I'm trying to apply this to different types of funding. So if, the food pantry as an example, we know that there are, just off the top of my head, 500 families a week that need food. But when you're doing an outreach program of maybe a mental health suicide awareness or whatever, it's more of a blanket education program. So it's hard to, put the same
need-
for both.
The need in
And
that
Suzanne, we will
case-
get to you in a second. I see your hand up.
Okay.
All right.
So the need in that case is that there would be, like, the measured evidence to support the scale and prevalence of the need would be reported substance misuse disorders, admissions for alcohol poisoning. Those are measured needs. It
Mhm.
doesn't have to be like you could be running a Maven report to determine the number of people who have gotten therapy. You could ask Fairwinds what their numbers are over a given time. It doesn't have to be an exhaustive public survey. It just needs to be some kind of measured evidence that is consistently collected to score the HA. If they don't have that, but there's clear anecdotal, or there's some degree of statistical evidence for the need, then they still get advantageous. And since this applies to every organization across the board, everyone's gonna be having the same scale, like what do they call it when they adjust the results of a test based on the score?
Curve.
Curve.
Graded.
Everyone will be graded along the same curve for this.
All right. Suzanne?
Yes, I was gonna say, why in the highly advantageous group, they're taking out the word measured and putting in the word observable evidence exist. Would that serve the purpose?
I think-
Observable and anecdotal evidence exists.
I am, that captures what I'd like to be in there, which is that we're doing some kind of data collection, even if it's the statistical analysis that, or looking up stats that support the particular conclusion that you have for need. So I have,
How
Zero.
about measured or observable? I like the observable. think
I
that's
like the
great.
observable very much.
Yes.
And I think I need to tell myself this, so maybe it will be helpful to other people. As currently a student and an overachiever or a perfectionist or whatever it is. Like, not everybody has to get the A. And I think we want to supply this application where everybody gets an HA, and it does not have to be, it should not be that way.
Exactly. If everybody's getting an A, it's not telling us anything useful.
Right,
But
So I think,
it's a sign because we want everybody to succeed. I mean,
yes,
we're just good-hearted people, but
yeah.
well,
But
and
observable, adding that in, I think helps, definitely.
yes, thank you, Suzanne, a lot.
all right, so if we are okay, need is common, serious in terms of consequences and are served, anecdotal and or limited statistical evidence for same. Need is limited, applies to overserved population or is duplicative. Limited anecdotal and no statistical evidence of the need. Need does not exist or cannot be demonstrated. Obviously, nobody is gonna come here for a year, like,
Right.
no one is suggesting this at all. This is basically not here, but that's what would disqualify you under this criteria.
Okay, but this is just an absurd example because, you know, we have so many needs on the side. I'm thinking that we know that our top, say, public health issues, you know, we've got skin cancer, we've got ticks. So if someone comes to us with an application that they want to, you know, provide hats for everyone on the island.
I would suggest that that does not qualify for a human service grant, flat out. It's, to me,
more
not
public
radically
health,
dissimilar.
right.
That there are other funding structures, there are state and so on. To me, that is similar or of a kind with the Habitat for Humanity.
Exactly. You know, so there are some that it will be just knocked out, and that's where we would knock out that the need does not exist or cannot be. Need does not, maybe rather need doesn't exist, but it just doesn't fall within the parameters of,
So that would be something that we disqualify before it gets to an evaluation period, if it's out of scope like that.
yeah,
Remember with the Habitat for Humanity, we didn't ask, like, that was just something that we ruled out ahead of time.
right.
And my strong belief is that we will have a letter of intent process in place before next year, where we would be ruling that out before they even write a full grant submission, which I think is the standard practice in most places. And
Right.
just we didn't have time due to scheduling concerns.
Okay. Alrighty. So I'm fine then with the demonstration of need.
Specific objectives. So I'm gonna change this to definable success. HA objectives are concise, demonstratable, and have clear success failure outcomes. The idea here is that we want to rate not how achievable their goal is, but whether or not it can be conclusively said to have been achieved or failed, right? Does that kind of arbitrary, like,
Yeah.
we don't want to punish people for having ambitious programming, but we want to know very clearly, ideally, the HA would be that we know exactly if it succeeds or exactly if it fails.
Right.
That's the optimal response. Are there issues with the phrasing objectives are concise, demonstratable, and have clear success failure outcomes? John, you've been kind of my most reliable, like, copy editor on these of,
Yeah.
hey,
Well, I'm not, at this point, I haven't got any good
Yeah.
positive. I think this it does. Maybe it can be tweaked sometime, but at the moment, I think we've done enough with the preceding questions. So at this point, it probably does work for the purposes that you have outlined for us, that this is basically a way of comparing. We're going to be, we know we're comparing apples and oranges in lots of ways. The one thing we're doing, they all have in common is the better human service condition of a variety of different segments of the Nantucket population. And so we're trying to have a way of saying, all right, we've looked at your programs and we have to make some kind of judgment as to where you fall in the scheme of our then allocating the town's resources.
Right.
This is, I'm not saying this is perfect, but I don't know that we're going to get very far spending a lot of time trying to rework this one, but that's just my view.
Yeah.
I think that's a solid point.
Yeah, I think so. John, I agree.
Yeah, this
All
one's
right.
pretty good.
With your guys' permission, I'm gonna scoot on to criteria 5. So this one also evolved out of one of the rubric questions included for the youth behavioral health grant.
Right.
I'm just gonna tighten up the wording on this and just leave it as collaboration.
Yeah. And, I think that what we have all learned, and I remember just some of the conversations we've had over the past 2 years, that we had some members that were adamant that you can't have collaboration, but I think that our island organizations have proved to us that they understand this and they can do it. So just tightening up the wording on this is perfectly fine.
So the ideal, highly advantageous response to collaboration would be a signed MOU between more than 2 agencies contributing to the program we're funding.
Mhm.
Do
Is
we
it
have
more than
any of
2?
those?
Oh, sorry, more than 2 for this one. Apologies.
It's not 2 or more?
So this is probably where we need to tweak it. I have formal collaboration between 2 partners or informal collaboration between more than 2 partners. So I'm gonna change, what would be a more reasonable phrasing of the highly advantageous collaboration?
Well, I have a question. Do we have any example of a formal signed agreement between any 2 of the organizations that we have ever funded?
Who,
Did and I'm thinking of ASAP, did they have a formal agreement with MAST? And I think
yes,
they would have to, because they use their services and their staff. So I think the answer is yes, John.
Okay, I just wasn't aware of one, and I was trying, that would not have come to my mind, thanks.
That's the first on the top of my head. And
there are also, in this case, an official explicit referral protocol from one agency to another would count as a formal, like, that in my head anyway, if you guys want to clarify that and we can make an official judgment, but like basically the optimal collaboration here is that MAST ASAP program. That's the
Oh,
the highest level of compliance for that. So I'm gonna switch this to,
okay,
go ahead.
John?
well, I recognize that, but to me, at least, as a, legalistic lawyer, the term agencies supplies to governmental or to formal, when I say formal, yes, it does imply some kind of a governmental situation. I wish we could get a better word than agencies.
so I'm
Would
gonna, how about,
organization be fine, or is it just using partners?
I'm happy with just it just happens to me that the agencies is, in many people's minds, they automatically think of something that has governmental funding one way or another.
Hmm.
That's if we could get away from that, I'm perfectly happy with the rest of the concept, and just if we can pick a different rubric, or not rubric,
Different word,
term.
descriptor. Yeah. Yeah,
So-
John, and I do appreciate your legal eyes on this, because you know, we don't always look at it through that, but agency does mean a formal organization, governmental or whatever, but organization is a little bit, it's a group of people for a purpose. So I think that works better if we say organization or partner.
So I'm gonna, I make this the change to organizations, and then the next thing I'd like some clarity on is, excuse me, more than. So we did note that we had one formal relationship between different organizations, but it's only between two, so we've never had an HA response to this. So
Right.
I'm wondering if we should click it down or run.
Yeah, I would,
So-
well, I would like 2 or more because that's hard enough from an
Mhm.
organizational standpoint.
Right.
If you can get a bunch of groups to agree, that's awesome, more power to you. But even if we can get 2 to work together, well, that's,
That's work, that's work in itself.
yeah, that's highly advantageous to me.
So then, if that's the gold standard, and you can only have a minimum of 2 partners in
Hello,
a collaboration, I'm gonna have to
Yep.
switch this and change it to informal collaboration between more than 2 partners. Is that acceptable to everyone?
Yes.
So this would be like what's the word I'm looking for here? Referral agreement between multiple agencies, commitment to do collaborative outreach, or participate in stakeholder organizations. And that kind of thing.
1930.
And then informal collaboration between 2 agencies. As a not advantageous, and then no collaboration would be unacceptable.
Right.
So. Yeah, okay, great.
You know, almost I would think if we just had 2 ratings, that either there's collaboration between another organization or partners and no collaboration. It's only like either you got it or you don't got it.
So unfortunately, we can't
Can't
have
do
a
that.
yeah. And the other part of that is that we want to incentivize or show that we will look more favorably on broader collaboration.
Right.
I worry sometimes that if we make collaboration a box to check off, then that's what it'll be, as opposed to like actually developing broader and more formal or more explicit collaboration across agencies or between organizations. So this is criteria 6, which is no longer a question we ask.
Yeah.
So this is probably the first one where I would just yank
Yeah.
the entire thing.
Right.
Are we comfortable with that?
You know, I understand why we want to see volunteers, but it's not a criteria that I'm trying to think of some program that you just don't have any volunteers. You're all staff members, and it's not coming
Well,
up.
the legal services is a perfect example.
Fair wins.
Fair wins.
Right.
Anything with confidentiality inquired, there are strict limitations on volunteering.
Yeah,
Now,
addiction
it's-
solutions.
It's
And-
not,
And the matter that you have volunteers or not doesn't make it one better over the other, because I don't think I'd want to have a volunteer legal person. You wouldn't want me to be giving advice. So it just, I don't think it's something that we really need. We took the
So-
question out.
It's
So
a nice
what-
idea to like leverage free labor, for sure. I do value that, but from the mental health perspective, there's just like, as far as service provision, there's never going to be a volunteer therapist.
Right. Right.
so what are we trying to understand or incentivize with this question?
Well, I would think that the only thing I can think of, I just think of a program that comes quickly to mind, something like Swim Across America, where you have volunteers who go out to get people to participate in the fundraising effort. Now that is it, and if we put that in the general area, that is, and I'm not sure that any of our organizations really are very well. You certainly have volunteers in connection with a safe place. They volunteer to be on the board of the safe place. I mean, they are volunteers.
Yeah, I mean, every organization will have a board, but, and even at a safe place, they at least used to have volunteers that would man the hotline sometimes, but
Or they volunteers who go, try and help you raise the money. But so I'm not sure.
that's not a program, like.
That's not a program, exactly.
Yeah.
Right, right. Suzanne, I see your hand up.
Back in the day when I was on a lot of committees and volunteering in a lot of organizations raising free children, I was a volunteer on Habitat for Humanity, Big Brothers Big Sisters, Safe Place. I was a volunteer for 6 years, and then I became a paid person who set up the programs to get the things into the schools. I did a lot of the training. The number of volunteers affecting an organization's need for funding, I don't know that the numbers, let's just say the organizations can't run without the volunteers, but those organizations shouldn't be not considered just because they're primarily made up of volunteers and a
Right.
small staff. So I don't know what you're trying to achieve by having that question in or pulling it out, but I do think it's important, like John said, the Swim Across America, that program is set up by volunteers, but what do they use the money for? The money goes towards the programs, right?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I think
So,
that's actually a good point. We're evaluating the role of volunteers in this particular program, not the usage of volunteers by the organization.
right.
It's my suggestion that this follow the narrative question arc and be removed.
Yeah,
I think so, because I mean, I'm just thinking like the warming place, like it's almost entirely volunteers. They're essential, but
right.
then I flip over and I'm thinking about Fairwinds, and it's like volunteers can, yeah, help fundraise and throw events and, maybe plant a garden outside, but they're not doing the service.
Right. And someone like the food pantry can't function without volunteers.
Exactly.
So,
Yeah,
it
but it doesn't tell you anything about how
effective.
effective the
effective the
program is.
Yeah.
right.
So that is the last of the established rubrics. There
Okay.
is no requirement for the number of rubric questions. There is no requirement for the contents therein, but we have some rubric ideas here, and I think it would do a disservice for us to just chop it here.
Right.
But we also only have about 15 minutes left.
Yeah.
For the scheduled meeting.
Can we look at the suggestions? If you
I
can
think
pull
that's,
that up.
I think that's a solid idea.
All
I
right.
would like to go through these sort of briefly first, and then we'll see if any stick out to us. Is that acceptable?
Yes.
Sure.
So we have, is the program goal or purpose clearly identified? Does the program clearly align with the town's grant criteria? Is the target population clearly, these were just everybody's ideas dropped
Right.
into a bucket.
Right.
Is the target population clearly identified? Is there clear description on program providing non-duplicated services? So I think these are a little more specific, but this I think stuck out to me as this is a big question that comes up for funding justification.
Right. Yeah.
Organizations' financial document submission. Are all financial documentation should be turned in complete? This is not part of the evaluation process. Program core services. Are they well thought out and clearly explained? Are program partnerships and collaborations clearly defined and used to enhance the programs? Is there data collection plan in place to be used for future program improvements? Is the budget detailed, complete, and clearly supports the work outlined? Is it purpose of funding detailed and clear? Thoughts are not organized, and there's some disclaimers in there as well.
Right.
And then these are the non-rubric related ones.
I
So-
like the measurement, if you go back up, data collection, program, innovation,
Where was it? There was the
A little bit
duplication
down
one.
target, financial, core services, partnership, no, a little bit up further, what was it? The duplication of services, innovation, duplication of services. Clear description program providing. Something is jumping out on that, and my brain is sort of mush at the moment. But the idea of there already exists a program that's doing the same thing. So is it a duplicate of
Yeah, I think it's a worthwhile.
yeah.
So I have two concerns on this, excuse me, which is that, one, I am not terribly confident of turning this into this level
Okay.
response that we're all on board with within 15 minutes.
Okay.
And given the cycle in which we're doing this, this must go out by next Tuesday at the latest.
Gotcha.
Okay.
We've already sort of semi-committed to that, and I really think it's important for us to keep the 1 month. The other is that I think that we should be judicious in what we add at once. We're going to be doing this again in about 6 months. So I think having a rubric that we clearly understand and that applies in an understandable way for us all is more important than adding additional questions to clarify things at this time. And I think that this process that we're about to go through for the CRC this year is going to make it way easier for us to do the rubric in the spring at the end of this fiscal year.
So in general, you're not recommending us add.
If there was like one thing that we could yank out and be like, that nails it. Because
Gotcha.
like, you're right, this innovation and duplication of service, we want them to be producing innovative programs. We also want to be rewarding people for looking at the field and determining what services already exist and finding gaps. If we in the next couple minutes can figure out a way to make that criteria 6, then I'm all in favor of that. I just don't want us to commit overly heavily to adding an additional question if it's not going to be a good one.
Okay. The one thing that I'm now looking at the questions we have, there's nothing that talks about their budgets or anything like that, but it doesn't have to just be in the rubric. We are going to be looking at their budgets, their program, how much money they're spending on X, Y, and Z. So that'll be in the evaluation process, but it's not going to be, it doesn't have to be in the rubric. Correct?
I
Unless
think so.
I mean, if we're telling them that this is what we're evaluating them on, I don't know.
So the rubric does not need to be inclusive of every criteria, but
Right.
it should cover the general outlines of them. If what you're asking is something like, is this too much money for the problem? Bluntly, does the budget match the need or something like that? I think we get it that with the combination of demonstration of need and size of population
Right,
potential.
right.
And we want these to be as they're all gonna be subjective necessarily, but we want to try and constrain the subjectivity of things. And the fact of the matter is, we're not experts in what the cost to deliver services are for every single thing that is applied to by us.
Right.
And what might seem unreasonable in certain circumstances is potentially not when fully assessed. But my suggestion is, what we're trying to capture with these is what the goals are for the organization or for the program, for the town. What problems can we solve? Does it match up with that? My belief is that there is a like the two things that like we want is data collection, duplicativeness. So what we're asking at is like, does the organization collect? No, that's not, because we have the definable success
Right,
constraint.
yeah, it's there.
Yeah, I
Maybe we just call it a day on this.
Yes, I think so.
We've got
Yeah.
a good rough draft of things we want to address
Yeah.
in this.
and this is gonna be an iterative process. We're gonna be doing this. My strong belief is that we should be doing this in collaboration with CHS every year.
Yeah.
It should be our last meeting of the fiscal year should be like, hey, how did it go? Did the rubric work? And should we add some more stuff?
Right. Right.
So
So
with your permission, I'm gonna just yank criteria 6.
goodbye. Yep.
Bye-bye.
I was supposed to be a dramatic delete and it was less dramatic than I wanted to be.
Okay.
All right, I'll clean that up in post. All right,
Okay, the only, looking to the next item on the agenda is finalizing a schedule for the bidders session, the release and evaluation period. So,
let's,
I think we've got to look at a calendar.
yep, I will throw a calendar up on the board. Uh, 2024.
And do we want to do the bidders information session in this time slot on a Friday? So we know that the committee can be present.
Yes. It's my belief that every pre-schedule, like we have every other Friday reserved. If we add an additional thing in, we should try and keep it Friday between 9 to 11 for all of our meetings going forward.
Okay. So, your goal is that this will be released on October 1st,
Yeah,
okay? You need to advertise. Will the advertisement be out on October 3rd?
the advertisement will be out on the following Thursday for when we get it submitted. The statute, the legal requirement in terms of notice is 2 consecutive weeks in the paper of record. So we will be fine releasing the RFP, communicating it out through through the mailing lists and social media, and if the advertisement goes up on Thursday, we're fine with that. That's not a big deal.
Okay, so October 3rd and October 10th, it would be advertised?
And I will probably try and run it additionally, but if we're gonna release, so October 1st, I would be posting the final document on the town website. I would be emailing. I'd be posting on the HHS webpage. I would be emailing previous applicants. I would be adding it to social media, ideally on a regular, like a recurring basis, once or twice a week for the remainder, but that's a comms decision.
I'd like to recommend the open house Q&A on the 18th. Which is about halfway through the cycle.
Agreed. We should really give a week plus for them to read through it, to get around to reading to it, to sharing it, you know.
Okay.
So October 18th as a proposed open, we'll call it the bidder
session.
information session. I was trying to get a funny acronym, but it's too late in the meeting.
Yeah.
For December 18th, and that would be between 9 and 2. I think we can massage that 9 and 2 because it's gonna be many different organizations needing to schedule for something on a Friday morning. So if we need to potentially shift the schedule to like early afternoon that Friday,
Mm-hmm.
depending on the availability of members, that's a possibility. But for now, 9 to 2 for an information session for a
9
grant.
to 11.
9 to 11.
9 to 11, right. Because
Please,
that will,
thank you.
It's 5 hours. It's 5 hours.
right, 9 to 11, it would be a formal presentation and then Q&As.
Basically, yeah. I mean, I think it would be about 15, 20 minutes on our part, explaining what we're looking for, what these particular questions mean, what the answers we're looking for are. And then there will absolutely be a ton of questions and they may be specific. So what we should do is we should determine before that meeting how detailed an answer we want to give. Like this is where the talking points has a negative connotation, but this is where we should be consistent in our message of like, do we want, like, if somebody says, hey, I want to do this, will you fund it? Like, that's not, I don't think we should be giving those kind of answers in that information session. So I think we should talk about that a little bit beforehand.
I feel like there's a PowerPoint. in here
Yeah.
somewhere, unfortunately.
Yeah.
I think so.
That's something that Veronica and Joanna and I will have to work out and then determine and then share it across so everyone's on board with that.
Okay, maybe what we can do is on the 11th, see if Joanna's available and we'll hammer out a PowerPoint on that day.
So the important dates section for right now, the non-meeting important dates is release on the 1st, collection November 1st.
Well, I would,
Let me just see where that lies.
It's a Friday, so
Friday,
why
let's
not?
do, how about do November 4th as collection?
Okay. And that is Monday.
Giving
that will
everybody
be-
that extra.
Yeah. The one last grammar check and change everything. So that'll be end of day
On the 4th.
on the 4th. And then we'll have this October 7th meeting for us to review the presentation. While this is out, the only meeting we absolutely have to have is that 18th open meeting.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think we should somehow try and get, we should start working on the schedule for the evaluation period, so that can be communicated for presentation days to them. Be like, hey, we're going to likely schedule our presentations for X and Y, like your presentations for X and Y. And then, Alexandria, we'll set up an online sign-up sheet for when people can get into the particular, like, we're gonna throw up a web page. It'll be first come, first served for those slots, and then we'll work around that. But basically, I think the 2 things we need to do before November, or the 3 things we need to do before November 4th, is we need to determine our schedule for evaluation, later date.
Mm-hmm.
Have that open meeting, and then have the consultant report.
Okay.
Can we, at this point, can we review what meetings we have nailed down?
Only the 18th and the 7th.
So the
October.
7th of November and the 18th of October.
Sorry,
No,
7th of
no, it's
October.
October 7th is the consultant meeting. And that's at 3 o'clock in the afternoon,
Yep.
7th?
Well, don't have that. Wait a minute.
It hasn't been confirmed. That's actually a select board work group that we have been invited to review the study results.
Okay. And we don't have a confirmed time?
It's 3 p.m.
Okay.
I don't have a confirmed link yet. But I'll reach out to Katie and just try and lock that down as quick as possible. Because we will have to post that as well for both CHS and CRC. I think we just do joint meeting and then copy whatever the agenda they have is.
Okay. So we'll get that out to everyone. And then the 18th will be the bidders session.
Yep.
That's the 18th of November, right?
Nope, October.
Oh,
October, we're still in October. So October 18th at 9 to 11.
okay, all right, I have that.
Okay, and then the date that the applications will be due is November 4th at end of day. You'll take a few days to get them to us, right, Jericho?
So I will compile them into a single document as I have in the past, and then email them out as soon as I am done with that. It will depend on how many applications we get. But in general, that takes me 1 to 2 business days from collection date. Assuming that everything comes in and all the formatting is fine and I don't need to reach out for additional info.
Okay.
Or
What I would
different
like
formats.
to do is if we could meet on November 8th, which is Friday, we will have the list of who's come in, et cetera, and then we make assignments on that day to the committee to, go more in depth. So we get that on November 8th, and then we start with meetings later in November after we all have gotten our assignments. Oh, are you gone?
So I'll be able to get you guys a list of which agencies have applied. The end of day, November 4th.
Did the meeting
I'll
just
have all-
end? That my screen went to the
No,
are we
it's still
still on?
going. It's still going.
We're
Okay, it
here.
is? Okay, all right. It's just that my screen went to I don't see anyone. I don't so everyone's
So let me-
still here. Okay.
Let me stop share and we're back to this now. I think we should be good.
Okay.
Okay, so I think we don't need to schedule too much past November 8th. Just know that we'll have a meeting on November 8th.
Right.
But I do think that on that October 18th meeting, we should take a second to talk about the schedule after the open session.
Okay.
Well, we know we have Fridays,
Yep.
Right.
and then we'll need an additional couple
Right.
days.
There will probably be we may need to do 2 meetings in 1 week during that evaluation period, specifically for the presentations.
Right.
Okay. All right.
Other than that, I think we can probably keep to a bi-weekly schedule through November until the evaluation period. And until we deliver recommendations.
Right. Right. Our goal is to have the recommendations, by the second week of January. Have it
I mean,
wrapped up.
I think that we can probably, I guess, soon start trying to plan meetings in December gets a little funky as soon as you
I
get
know.
past the 2nd week. So yeah, first week of, first
Yeah, maybe by
weeks of
January
January.
17th, maybe. So if we have more, yeah.
And then we're gonna have a like kind of digest version of the report that we will present to FinCom. And then most likely it will be me, you and Joanna doing the actual presentation to FinCom,
Okay.
which would take place while they're getting their recommendations together for annual town meeting.
Right.
Does anyone remember when ATM is this year?
Yeah, they did publicize. It's the beginning of May, maybe
Okay.
May 6th, maybe? I remember seeing it, but it is May.
So we really want to get all of our stuff done in our presentation to FinCom by February.
Yeah.
And we should have our recommendations by January, and then give a couple weeks for the chair, vice, and staff to get the report together.
Okay. Now, we're talking about human services, the 650. What about cannabis? Is it being released at the same time?
I was planning on it,
Okay,
I
And
don't
what I
see any
would just-
reason to delay.
with the extra amount of time for preparation, I think that we can release 2 grants at the same time without overloading applicants.
okay. So,
Information session would be for both.
okay, for both? Okay. All right. Yeah, because the application is the same and we're really talking about the mechanics of the application and what we're looking for. We're not talking about specific program needs, et cetera. So it could all be done at once.
Yep.
Yeah, okay.
I mean, I guess the question that as a potential applicant, I would ask, and we should have a prepared answer for is this for new programs or ongoing programs?
For this session, it is for both.
Everybody.
Perfect.
Next spring, when we're figuring this out, is when we talk about pre-splitting into buckets for particular uses.
Right.
And I think that specifically is where we want to work on an initial partnership with CFN, if that passes the legal test.
Yeah.
Where CFN can give seed money, actual seed money. We cannot.
Gotcha.
Like, we have to reimburse. We cannot pay.
Well,
ahead.
right, yeah.
So that being the case, I think we hold big structural changes like that, like, sorry, go ahead, John.
I just wanted to let you know on Friday, the 11th, I will have to leave by about 10:30 because I have a follow-up eye appointment. I'm having cataract surgery on Tuesday.
Okay,
Just so you know, terms for quorum and those issues. I know I will have to leave early.
I
Okay,
don't
and
know
that-
that, do we have anything that day yet?
there's nothing currently scheduled there, but if we do.
There's nothing scheduled for the 11th. Okay,
Okay, we're good.
then I'll get rid of it.
Okay. Good luck with that, John.
Yes.
Hmm. It's important.
Well,
Okay.
I had my right eye done in 2020. This cataract, it took these years to get to the point where it's being done.
Good. All right, well, best
Um,
of luck. All right, so do you think we're done at this point? Anything
For
else?
this meeting, yeah. So I will send out, I will send out the finalized rubric to everyone over this weekend. That is gonna be your last chance to tweak anything before November 1st. Sorry, before October 1st, when it goes out.
Okay,
So I'm gonna try and get that done today. And if so, I'll get it out as quick as I can, and I'll get the finalized rubric into the agreement as well.
so I think that's it. My understanding is we cannot officially close the meeting,
No,
so meeting will have to be closed on the 18th when we're back together then.
correct.
Actually,
Okay.
it'll have to be done on the 7th, 8th, whatever. Or can it be open that whole time till the 18th?
Oh, no, we'll close it on the 7th for the interim. That will technically be another meeting of ours, so we can close it there.
Okay,
If we have a quorum, right?
Right,
It's not an actual meeting. We can still have it if there's no quorum, because it's just us notifying that we're discussing things that
Right.
are under our jurisdiction. If we have a quorum, we can close it. If not, we can't.
Okay. All right, I've made a note of that.
Awesome. Thank you
All
very
right.
much, guys. I'm gonna end this meeting.
Thank you, everyone, and
Thank
thank you
you.
for our guests, Suzanne and Tara. Thanks for jumping in today. I think,
It was nice to be here. Thank you.
and hopefully, Suzanne, you're getting a more global picture of all of this.
Absolutely.
All right. And Tara, thank you for your expertise from other areas. So appreciate it. So have a
Well,
great weekend, everybody. And
Bye-bye.
we'll see each other soon. All right. Bye-bye now.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.